going on, everybody? What's up? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you so much, as always, for watching the show, for listening. However you are consuming this, I do want to let you know, going forward, the only way that you're guaranteed to see every episode, or listen to every episode, I should say, in its entirety, is to make sure you are following or subscribed on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to audio podcasts. Most videos will be up in full on YouTube, but not all. We'll have clips for every episode. Live streams will be up. But again, the only way to be guaranteed to listen to every episode, make sure you are following on the audio side, even if you typically watch the videos on YouTube. So make sure you do that. Big shout out real quick to our sponsor for today's show, the law office of William Mattar. Heard of the car? Call William Mattar, 444-4444. Call William Mattar today to get the compensation that you deserve. This is our midweek Wednesday podcast. As usual, I'm joined by my good friend over at SB Nation, a under the weather, but a gamer, a trooper. Matt Moran is still with us today, despite not feeling very well. What's up, buddy?
Yeah, it is what it is. It's February 24th while we're recording here today, February 25th when you're listening to it. And like all of us are pretty much done with this winter stuff, I think. This just kind of crystallizes that,
It was so nice early last week, mid last week, just to be able to walk around in maybe a light jacket. It felt, you know how it is in Buffalo. If it hits the 30s in February, you're acting like it's summertime, basically. You know what I mean? You don't have any jacket, maybe a hoodie, a fleece or something like that. It was really nice. But yeah, we've been reminded over the last few days that winter is indeed not over in Western New York. Now, to be fair, it could be worse. We could be in New York City or New Jersey or along that coast, Boston, that are getting pummeled with snow. So
yeah, I was supposed to be traveling and that got canceled. So there you go.
Oh, that's right. That is right. Yeah. All right. So let me set the stage for today. We're going to spend some time talking about five guys. Actually, I got a bonus 6-1 too, but five guys that I feel like could be potential diamonds in the rough for the Buffalo Bills in 2026. Five names that we're, as Bills fans, pretty familiar with, but you don't think too much about. But I think their roles could increase on this team next year. So I'm going to get Matt's thoughts on each of those. And then, since every episode ultimately seems to lead back to wide receiver, I'm going to run a handful of potential free agents or trade acquisitions past Matt. These are all wide receivers, and we'll kind of do our little metered scale that we like to do from time to time. We'll rank Matt's interests somewhere between 1 to 10 on each of those. I do also want to let people know we're recording, as we usually do, Matt and I, around 10:30, 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. The NFL Combine is going on right now as we speak. Brandon Beane, Joe Brady are scheduled to speak a couple hours after we wrap up. So we won't be covering anything that's said today on this show. If there's anything noteworthy, I'll certainly discuss it on the show tomorrow. But just want to let everybody know where we were with that. I was glancing real quick as we're getting into today's taping at the Combine. Miami's GM, I think it's Sullivan now. I can't even remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's Sullivan. Anyway, he confirmed, I thought this was pretty interesting. A quick thought on this, maybe as it pertains to the Bills, I don't know, but he confirmed that they're listening in on offers for Miami safety Minkah Fitzpatrick. I mean, it certainly would make sense. They got rid of Chubb, they got rid of Hill. I'm sure Tua's probably played his last game anyway. Big changes coming in Miami, and he all but confirmed that they are listening in on offers for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Is that a player that would interest you, Matt? And, are we at the point now where some people think Miami would never trade with the Bills or a division foe? I don't necessarily buy that anymore. I feel like you get the best offer that you can get. But anyway, I don't know. Just some thoughts on a possibility of Fitzpatrick being on the move, and maybe if the Bills would jump into that mix. I mean, they got other needs, so I don't know that giving up, a decent, better than decent draft asset for a safety would be in the cards for the Bills. But got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not really in the market for a $15 million 30-year-old safety right now. in the last year of his contract. It's just not a priority for me at this point. I think they could get similar production from someone that's cheaper or something like that. And I don't know. There's a reason that 2 and now 3 teams, including the Dolphins twice, would be interested in trading a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think he's very talented, but obviously they don't think he's essential because they both got rid of him.
Yeah, I'm with you there 100%. That's not a guy that it's not even about the capital. Like, even if you could get an early day 3 pick, I don't even think I'd give up an early day 3 pick for him, considering what you got to pay.
Yeah.
Considering what you got to pay, what you need to address on this team, and where you're going to be allocating your financial resources towards, it doesn't make sense to me to invest draft capital or player capital into a player that you're ultimately going to pay as well. I think there's cheaper labor out there. They might not be as good as Fitzpatrick per se, but you can address that position with cheaper labor. Or maybe as we go on throughout the show, that answer could be internal right now, and we don't know it yet. And you know what I'm saying? And then be able to allocate those resources kind of somewhere else. The only other thing I'm seeing is we're live in our recording anyway. The Raiders, kind of the basic thing about Crosby. We like him. We want him. He's an elite player. But, you know, we'd be fools to not listen to, you know, what teams are calling about. You know what? Hey, hell, since I got you on and we're going to be spending so much time talking about receivers and stuff, a guy like Max Crosby, is that a game changer for you? Is that, I mean, Fitzpatrick, that was an easy agree for me with you. Is a guy like Crosby and what you probably have to give up to go get a guy like that, is that something that you're entertaining when you take a look at the blueprint right now, personnel-wise, with this defense?
Well, he's certainly a guy that's going to play enough snaps to justify the move. If he's like a traditional edge player and he's playing like 60% of the snaps, it doesn't really matter to me. Like, I just don't see how you can trade, you know, a high first rounder plus something else and pay him what you're going to have to pay him in order for him to make a big enough impact. And so it's just a matter of, you know, in the NBA, we talk about players can make a huge impact because they're playing the whole game or almost the whole game. And on the defensive side of the ball, at least under Sean McDermott and under pretty much every NFL defensive coordinator, you're rotating guys on that defensive line to keep them fresh. But Crosby is one of those guys that plays just a high volume of snaps. And so he's worth one or the other to me. He's not worth trading a huge package and paying, you know, top dollar for. That's the issue. And so when we get to a guy like Myles Garrett, who I think can take over a game, I think Max Crosby is super talented, but I think he's just in a little bit of a different category than a guy that, you know, like Myles Garrett, who, you know, set the NFL sack record.
Let me sneak one more question in here. Okay. Because it's a guy that for the past 2 years, I feel like he's been linked to trade rumors because he wasn't happy with the Bengals and he wasn't going to sign a long-term deal. I'm talking about Trey Hendrickson, of course. Yeah. This is a guy that I'm sure you and I over the last year or so have talked about with trade rumors. I know it's a polarizing subject on Twitter. Well, we don't have to talk about trade rumors anymore because he's a free agent. He's going to cost a lot of money, I am quite certain, but Trey Hendrickson, like I agree with you about Max Crosby because it's not even so much the contract, it's the contract, plus you're giving up a first-round pick, plus you're giving up more than just a first-round pick probably to get Max Crosby. Trey Hendrickson, if you were interested in him, it's just about being willing to create as much cap space and open up the wallet and give him that great deal. Is that a type of player that interests you? Somebody like Trey Hendrickson?
I think he's a better fit somewhere else, especially with the Bills moving to a different type of that 3-4 defensive front. I know they're going to be multiple and all this other stuff. I just think he's a better fit financially and scheme-wise for another team that's going to be able to pay him more and slot him in a better role. So I don't think he's a perfect fit for what the Bills are looking for.
I think there's a lot of fans, and I'll include myself amongst us at times, where we're still a little bit confused about the 3-4. Like, they're going to play some both. It's going to be more of a hybrid, but it's tough to kind of figure out, well, this guy, we know he's a 4-3 defensive end. Does it mean is he going to be a 3-4 outside rush linebacker? Is it going to be a good fit? When you're transitioning, especially like that first year, it feels like some of these guys, it's kind of hard to figure out if they're going to be good fits, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to figure out if they're going to be good fits. You could put him in that pass rushing linebacker role. He could even put his hand in the dirt, half the time or whatever on say rundowns and things like that. But like his skill is rushing the passer. And it's not like that's necessarily different based on whether you're standing up or put your hand in the ground. It's just, I think he could be a definite asset to them. But like I said, I think he's just a better fit on a different defensive scheme and especially on a different salary cap.
I almost feel like this might become the Matt Warren flu game here. I almost feel bad. I'm making
my eyes are watering.
Your eyes?
My eyes are watering, and I'm trying to get them to stop.
Sorry. I'm not, for people listen to the show, I usually don't say, well, come on over to the video side. But if you want to see someone who looks near death still out there dropping 30 points in the second half, it might be Matt Warren today.
I don't have a fever. I'm like, it's just my eyes are watering.
Yeah,
the audio people are in for a treat today. I'll tell you
that for sure. All right, real quick, Marcel Louis-Jacques too. Former Buffalo reporter, esteemed Miami Dolphins beat reporter, just said the Dolphins see Devon Achane and Jalen Waddle as important parts of the franchise. To listen to offers for both players as they would for any player, but the plan is for them both to remain in Miami per John Eric Sullivan. That's the GM. They're not actively shopping either player. I'm going to ask you about Jalen Waddle a little bit later in the show. Just a little bit of a spoiler for everybody. All right, let's get into, like I said, these are guys, and this isn't going to be a particularly long show, especially considering, like I said, I am torturing Matt right now. Every
time I talk to you is torture, Pat.
That's fair. I don't blame you. 5 Buffalo Bills who I think potentially could become diamonds in the rough. Like if we were to do this a couple years ago, like Terrell Bernard going into 2024, like he really didn't do anything his rookie year. And it's like, it doesn't look like such a great pick. And then, he turns it around. We see that all the time. Players step up and become good players. These are 5 that I feel like are in line for that type of, maybe not becoming Pro Bowl caliber or captains, but certainly players who I think could have a much bigger role on the team this year than they did the past year. The first one, maybe a week ago, wouldn't have been so obvious, but I certainly feel it's obvious now, and that's offensive lineman Alec Anderson. The Bills re-signed him to a one-year deal for $3 million, $1.8 million guaranteed. I look at him, Matt, and to be fair, I also looked at him like this before this signing. I think he is absolutely the heads-on favorite to be the guy who takes over for David Edwards this season. I think just like David Edwards was that 6th offensive lineman and ultimately became a 2-year starting guard, I kind of feel like that same trajectory there is for Alec Anderson. And I love the salary, 3.8. Last week, I did a offseason forecast, a mock offseason, and during my re-signings, he was a restricted free agent, and I had the Bills putting a second-round tender on him. I thought he was important enough to lose that I didn't just want to slap the original 3-point something. I said I was willing to pay him $5 million to put a second-round tender on him. See how I'm making Matt so emotional right now that he's nearly in tears as I talk about Alec Anderson. But anyway, Alec Anderson, I think he's your starting guard. Yep. He's certainly a valuable piece, and he was a valuable piece going into this offseason, but I think he takes the next step now, and he's going to be a diamond in the rough, potential one anyway. What do you think?
Yeah, and I mean, you were talking about guys you would assign this to a couple of years ago, and David Edwards was that guy. He was the 6th offensive lineman, moved into the starting lineup, just like Alec Anderson is set to be right now. And so, to your point, I was surprised that he agreed for something less than the original round tender. That was what I put out on Twitter when it happened. So I was surprised about that. Happy about that from a Bills perspective. Not only that, he's a quote machine, and I just love him in the locker room, hearing what he has to say after games and practices and stuff like that. So he's a guy I definitely think that they are going to be counting on in a major role this year.
He won me over in that Pittsburgh game. I remember the game so well. Him and Ryan Vandermark were the starting tackles. I'm like, this is going to be a freaking disaster for the Bills. No Spencer Brown, no Deion Dawkins, and Anderson stepped up and he was good. I'm confident that he could step in and fill that role. I like David Edwards, by the way. I think we could both agree I know this is about the diamonds in the roughs and not about Bills pending free agents, but I think you and I can both agree that David Edwards is gone, especially with this move. He's going to go get money somewhere else. He maybe not $19 million like Spot Rack is projecting, but if he gets $12 million,
It'll be a lot.
He's going to get a payday. Good for him, too. I don't mind players going out and earning that big contract. You know, when you play in Buffalo for a couple of years, again, he got $3 million a year the last 2 years. He's so far exceeded the value of his contract that he deserves to go out there and get paid. Absolutely. So I'm very happy for David Edwards. But yeah, I think Alec Anderson has an excellent chance. I was a little bit surprised, too, that he signed, that contract this early. I kind of feel like that comes attached with, hey, we can't guarantee you're going to be the starter, but you absolutely are penciled in right now to be our guy. And then you go, you play well, and you're going to get a big contract. So good for him. This next guy, at times he's been a splashy player before this, but maybe with this new defense, the fact that I personally don't think Shaq Thompson's going to be back. I could be wrong. But if I just feel like Dorian Williams has an excellent opportunity. What he does with it will be on him. But I think there's going to be an opportunity for Dorian Williams to become a more impactful, more consistently on the field type of linebacker for the Bills. I think Milano's gone for sure. I don't think Shaq Thompson's going to be back. Bernard's going to be back. We'll see if he holds up, and we'll see how he performs. We'll see how he looks in this defense. I'm not going to take this black Sharpie that's in my hand and write down Terrell Bernard as my starting inside linebacker on this defense. I kind of feel like it's a reset, and if he doesn't earn that spot, I don't care what his contract is. He's not going to start. Anyway, my point, I think Dorian Williams in this defense, in a 3-4 defense, maybe as an inside linebacker in a 3-4. He did play inside linebacker plenty in college, too, so it's not unseen for him to do this before. I just feel like the opportunity is there for him to become more of an impactful player for this team this season.
Yeah, I think especially because it's the last year of his contract, he's going to get every opportunity to earn a starting job and play for his next contract, whether it's in Buffalo or somewhere else. And like you said, I think he fits the defensive scheme a little bit better than Terrell Bernard. They do have 2 inside linebacker spots, and you could see both of them filling those 2 spots as well. So I'm with you on Dorian Williams. I think he's going to get every opportunity. Even if they draft someone or bring somebody in, he's going to have an opportunity to be the starter for this team.
I like how you mentioned this being the final year of his contract, because just in sports in general, not always, but quite often it seems that a player plays at their best when they have something to play for financially as well. So he's going to be hungry. He's a go player. You know what I mean? He's not the greatest processor on the football field. I feel like Terrell Bernard's a little more of a processor. Shaq Thompson more of a processor. Dorian Williams is go attack. Yep. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel like in a Jim Leonard defense, that is what suits him the best. Put it this way. I wouldn't have him in this list. If Sean McDermott was returning next year and the defense was just going to be the same with maybe a couple different players here and there plugged in and out, I wouldn't have Dorian Williams on this list. But with Jim Leonard as the defensive coordinator, the style of defense that he wants to play and what type of game suits Dorian Williams the best, I kind of feel like this is going to be a great opportunity for him. Jackson Hawes, second year he'll be going into tight end. I have him on this list for 2 reasons. Number one, I think the trajectory was there anyway. I was very impressed with him last season. If you've been a regular listener or viewer to this show, you know that every year, or every week, I should say, during the season, Matt and I would do our positional analysis, and Matt would put a grade on the Bills' performance, position by position each game. And tight end just consistently ended up being the highest graded position. Jackson Hawes had a nice little role in that as that third tight end. We knew about the blocking, and he was fantastic as a blocker. He also caught 3 touchdown passes, and he made a couple nice down-the-field catches, too, as well. So I would have him on this list anyway, Matt. But the fact that I think, and we'll see over the next few weeks, but I think there's a very fair chance that the Bills, although I don't think they want to, I think they might move on from Dawson Knox. They could save $9.4 million by cutting him. Maybe they work something out with a pay cut or something. I hope that happens because I think Dawson Knox would be good for him to be back. But especially if he's not, but even if he is, I think Jackson Hawes could have a bigger role on this team in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, to the Dawson Knox point, they're going to offer him a pay cut at some point and say, you're not going to make this much on the open market. You want to stay in Buffalo. Your family is in Buffalo. So I do think that it's probably likely that Dawson Knox takes a pay cut and stays in Buffalo. But that's just speculation right at this point.
Sure.
We're talking about Jackson Hawes. We saw the Rams run more 3 tight end sets this year, even a couple 4 tight end sets in some of the games, and go bigger, especially because I don't think the Bills can completely revamp their wide receiver group in one offseason like many want them to. I think that tight ends are still going to play a really important role in the 2026 offense. And so I like this as a, diamond in the rough pick, even though like he's on a lot of people's radar now. Like, I mean, it's not like he's flying under the radar and going to surprise people. I mean, he could have a really significant role both in the run game and the pass game next year. And like if Dalton Kincaid is healthy, if Dawson Knox is back, they could roll out a really deep tight end group once again.
When you draft and develop, that's what it's all about. And again, I want to preface this by saying I hope Dawson Knox is back. It would be nice for them to bring him back, in part because I don't know that Dalton Kincaid is ever going to be more than a 40 to 45% of the snap volume share player. And that's okay if he's producing. I don't give a shit how many snaps he's out there for. I care about that he's out there when they're throwing the football, and I care that he catches the football and makes plays. All right, so I want to be clear about that. But this is why you draft and develop players. You take Jackson Hawes in the 5th round, you develop him because you know that the following year you might lose Dawson Knox. GMs draft players because they look into the future. They're like, well, we're not going to be able to keep this player beyond this year. So I feel like in part that's a reason why. But to your point, and I agree, whether Dawson Knox ultimately stays or goes, I still think there's a nice role that could be carved out for Jackson Hawes. All right.
And Dalton Kincaid is going to get more expensive in 2027.
Yes.
So Dawson Knox, I can't remember how many years he has left on his deal. I think it might only be 1 at this point. And so like looking toward the future, you're trying to grow Jackson Hawes into a guy that can replace either Dalton Kincaid, which probably not same skill set, or Dawson Knox. Maybe that is a better thing. Like you draft Jackson Hawes to replace Dawson Knox.
Real quick, I'm kind of like keeping one eye on the combine and GM speaking. Well, Joe Schoen, Giants GM, just said on Thibodeau, their defensive edge. He goes, right now, Kayvon's going to be with us. He played well. He's going into his 5th year and he's motivated, and you can't have enough pass rushers. Boy, that sure sounds like someone who's on the trade market, doesn't it? We're
going to get something in like Hard Knocks where it's like that's like the first salvo, and then there's like 5 different conversations between Joe Shane, Dan Morgan, and Brandon Beane before he ends up in Buffalo.
Oh, 100%. All right, so these first 3 guys, Alec Anderson, Dorian Williams, Jackson Hawes, I don't feel like fans are going to be pushing back much, if at all, on those. I think those are pretty logical, non-surprising names. The next one I have, maybe I'm wrong, but I kind of feel like some people are going to push back on. And that's actually Jordan Hancock. And I don't know what his role is going to be on this team next year. Because is he a safety? He played safety this past year with Sean McDermott, but he also played a lot of nickelback in college. And in fact, early in training camp, he was playing plenty of nickel as well. I remember seeing that at a lot of training camp practices. Again, this is a new coordinator who's going to have a new set of eyes on him, a new defensive staff, a new DBs coach. I like Jordan Hancock. I was high on him last year. I thought this was an excellent pick for the Bills. I think he flashed at times. He played well. If you remember, late at camp and in the preseason especially, he played great, but then he got hurt. So that put him behind the 8 ball at the beginning of the season. Then Jordan Poyer comes in, and Hancock kind of became the dime back, and he would come in when Poyer would come out in obvious passing situations, and that worked for a lot of the season, and he was fine, nothing spectacular, but he was fine. Then came the playoff game, that Jacksonville game, an utter nightmare. Jordan Poyer gets hurt, Hancock comes in, he gets cooked a couple times, he played really bad, which led to Sean McDermott, a decision I'm sure he wishes he had back in hindsight, but we don't live in hindsight. But he goes with Savage over Hancock actually he went with Cam Lewis to start, and then he went with Savage over Hancock. So we buried Hancock in that Denver game on the depth chart, and Savage, of course, got beat for that touchdown, which hurt the defense. I like the kid. I still think he's a good ball player. I think he's very athletic. Could he be a safety alongside Cole Bishop next year? Is that in play? Could he be a nickel slot corner with the Bills maybe moving on from Teron Johnson? I don't think so, but I wouldn't rule that out. But anyway, I kind of feel like maybe even if he doesn't start, he just becomes a guy like Cam Lewis has been, who you could just plug into a couple spots. You see him on the field a lot, and he makes plays. I don't know what his role could be next year specifically yet, but I feel like there's something there for him, and I think he could become a useful player. I'm high on Jordan Hancock. I'm not going to be out on him because he played like shit getting thrown into the fire against the Jacksonville Jaguars. What do you think?
Yeah, you hit on two really interesting things, I think. First, I think his biggest drawback was his inexperience. And obviously he's going to have more experience, and he's going to have another set of coaches telling him what to do, which may be a good thing, may be a bad thing, right? Like year 2 in a system might be better than year 1, or the system that he's going into might be better than the one he was in. So it could go either way. But I think he's probably my favorite player on this, quote, diamonds in the rough list, because I really don't know where they're going to play him next year. And I feel like he has a chance to earn a spot somewhere. He has a chance to go in, and like Cam Lewis is a free agent, right? He can earn that spot as that primary backup nickel and safety. He could go out and earn a starting job at safety. The Bills don't have a starting safety opposite Cole Bishop. He could go out and earn that job. They could move on from Taron Johnson to save some money and give him every opportunity to earn that nickel slot, even though the nickel is going to be a little bit less important under our new defensive staff. And so I think there's several avenues for him to carve out a significant role. And so that's why I said I like him in this diamonds in the rough category. I don't know if he's going to do that, but I like that he has several different opportunities to do that.
The last guy on this list, and I got to predicate this by saying this purely depends on if Connor McGovern resigns. If Connor McGovern resigns, he's your center. And again, I think Alec Anderson is your starting guard, and Seth Pran Granger is what he was what he is in 2026 is what he was in 2025 as well. So I don't know what his role is going to be, but I'm going to go on the assumption that the Bills don't re-sign Connor McGovern. I think somebody's going to pay big bucks for Connor. We'll see how that plays out. So I guess when it comes to Seth Pran Granger, if you want to give me a take about what you think about him as a player, that's fine. But I will kind of turn this into a question too. Do you agree with me? David Edwards is not going to be back now. I think we could both, it's not official, but I think we could both assume that anyway. What do you think the chances are that McGovern is back? And if he's not, what do you think of Seth Pran Granger?
So I actually don't agree with you on him not being important if Connor McGovern comes back. The Bills have rolled, deep with offensive line depth over the last few years. And so if you lose David Edwards and you lose Connor McGovern and you just roll with Cedric Van Pran Granger and David Edwards, Alec Anderson, don't have that depth that you had. And so even if they do re-sign Connor McGovern and PG is your primary interior backup, that's still a role the Bills should have on their team and could be an important one. The Bills have been incredibly lucky with their health on the offensive line over the last few years. And so they haven't had to use a lot of those backup linemen, but having that there is peace of mind for Brandon Beane, who said his number one priority is protecting Josh Allen. So I disagree with you slightly on the Connor McGovern of it all, because even if he does come back, I think Cedric Van Pran Granger is going to be important. If he's the starter, which again, they drafted him to do this. They draft and develop offensive linemen to do this kind of thing, is to slot him in. But they haven't done that recently at the center position. Obviously they had Connor McGovern at guard, slid him over to center. They signed Mitch Morse before that. to solidify a position that was really kind of up in the air. And so they obviously valued that position. So I could see them re-signing Connor McGovern and, for some sort of hometown discount. I don't think it's going to be at the very top of the center market. So back to Cedric Van Pran Granger. None of us have really seen him play except for, some preseason stuff. It's really about what's going on inside the building. And I just don't have any sense of what that actually is right now. I think he's going to certainly be given an opportunity, and his offensive line coach also retired, just for the record.
And that's big too.
That's obviously, a little bit less loyalty in the room, perhaps.
Sure.
So there's a lot of moving pieces on that offensive line, literally and figuratively. So, it's no given that he's going to be given a shot to start. But I do think that, if they do like him in the building, he's going to have a really, a good bite at that apple to try to win that job if Connor McGovern leaves.
Right before the break, we were talking offensive line, and of course, you mentioned about Aaron Kromer retiring, possibility that they may have not one but two new starters on this offensive line. I feel like one of the low-key things that we've taken for granted over the last couple of years has been the continuity and the consistency of the offensive line. Are you a little bit worried going into this next season at having a new offensive line coach and having very potentially, again, we'll see how it plays out, but a new center and a new starting guard as well? That's 40% of your line and a new offensive line coach. Again, this is something you kind of you take for granted. There's things in life and sports you take for granted. Offensive line being good for the Bills has been one of them. Maybe that's not something we won't be doing that going forward.
No, I think that's a really fair point. The way people talk about Aaron Kromer as like life-changing for offensive linemen shouldn't be understated. He was one of the best offensive line coaches in the entire NFL, if not the best. And so replacing him with somebody else shouldn't be a given that it's going to be the same level. I do want to also shout out, at least here, Rob Boris was the tight ends coach for the last several years under Sean McDermott. He's now the run game coordinator and tight ends coach. And I do have a lot of respect for what he's been able to bring to this offense over the last 8 years, and really what he was able to do before that too. So Rob Boris getting that extra title does give me a little bit of confidence that they can have some continuity there because he has familiarity with all that stuff. So I'm not saying that it's going to be worse next year, but I'm saying that the possibility certainly exists that it's going to be worse. And I do agree with you that people take it for granted that, it's just going to be flip this guy in, and it's going to be fine. I don't necessarily think it's going to be the exact same.
Before we get to wide receivers real quick, kind of a bonus potential diamond in the rough. Kalike Latu, the tight end.
Yeah.
The reason why I have him in here is, well, first, again, if Dawson Knox is back, their tight end room is pretty much set, and Latu's in the same position he was last year, practice squad guy, the fourth tight end on the team. But I found it pretty telling last year when Sean McDermott was having to do roster gymnastics with the 53 and the elevations at the end of the season and in the playoffs. I thought for sure Latu could be a guy that they release, and they could sign an extra defensive lineman like maybe Judon or somebody like who the hell was number 75? That Andre Jones Jr., the defensive end, somebody like that I thought would be brought up to the roster for the playoffs, but he wasn't. They kept Latu on the 53. Even though he was inactive, they kept him on the 53. That tells me that they think enough of him that they didn't want to risk losing him to another team for waivers for this coming season.
53, it was they had him signed for 2026 too. So if they cut him in the playoffs in 2025, that goes away too. And then they have to re-sign him when all 32 teams or all 31 other teams get back at him. So it wasn't just waivers. It was also this offseason.
Right. So the fact that they kept him tells me that they think something of him. And again, if Knox leaves, it's kind of like, well, next man up. Now you become a bigger player in this team. There's something about him that they like, man. I guess that's what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if we look at what the Rams were able to do this year on their offense, they went 3 tight ends a lot of the time. I mean, not a lot of the time. I mean, it's relatively speaking, it's more than you would expect, I'll say. And then they even had a couple times where they had 4 tight ends. having 4 tight ends is a luxury, but also Reggie Gilliam's a free agent. Maybe they move him into some sort of hybrid role. There's a lot of ways that he can make an impact as well, even if he does just have a great training camp, a great preseason, and end up back on the practice squad, because we've seen Dalton Kincaid not be able to, finish a full season. Like, there's going to be opportunities for them to use Latu in actual games.
Quick sidebar. If they don't sign Reggie Gilliam, that is not going to go over well. That's not going to go over well. Brandon Bean, if you're trying to, get brownie points back with Bills fans, Bills Mafia, I would highly suggest that you re-sign Reggie Gilliam, because that will not play well if he ends up going to another team. I'm telling you now. It's
funny that people said almost the same thing. I think Reggie Gilliam has a higher level of fan love than Quentin Morris did. But I just remember when Quentin Morris was entering free agency, everyone's like, oh, they're just going to re-sign Quentin Morris and go roll back with him. And then they draft Jackson Hawes and, obviously completely change their offense. So I don't think it's a given that they re-sign Reggie Gilliam, but obviously a lot of us in the fan base would really like to see that.
I thought last year you said Quentin Morris. It's an interesting one. I thought the same way about Matt Collins. I'm like, Matt Collins, this is a no-brainer. He's your fourth receiver, core special teams guy. He's going to be back. You re-sign him. Of course, he ends up going to the New England Patriots. So nothing's a given. All right, let's get into some wide receivers here. Again, I want you to rate somewhere between 1 to 10 your level of interest in the player. I want things factored in too as well, because of course, who wouldn't want any of these players on the team? But you're going to have to factor in what you think their contract might cost, and plus if it's a trade, what you might have to give up to give them. Like, who wouldn't want Justin Jefferson? But if I tell you you're going to give me 3 1s, that change, you know what I'm saying? That kind of changes the game a little bit. So,
and Jefferson, the cap space doesn't make sense for Jefferson. Like, people don't talk about this with the Vikings. They have the worst cap situation in the league, despite having a rookie quarterback contract. Like, they're 32nd in cap space right now at negative $42 million. So the dead cap for trading Justin Jefferson would be $46 million on top of that. So they would have to clear like $90 million in cap space without a quarterback contract to do that with. Like, I just don't see how they even do that. Like, Justin Jefferson could walk into the GM's office and take a dump on his desk, and I don't think they could trade him.
Yeah, listen.
Sorry for the color there.
No, I listen, I can't, in good conscience, I cannot include Justin Jefferson on this list, and I can't include Marvin Harrison Jr. on this list too. I know there's some people that want to think that Arizona could trade him. They're not trading him. They're going to get a quarterback this offseason. Maybe it's Malik Willis. They're going to get somebody, and they're not going to go trade Marvin Harrison Jr. going into year 3. It's not going to happen.
Right. I mean, obviously, I would love Harrison Jr. on this team, but I think the trade compensation would be so high that it wouldn't make it worth it.
No, 100% no. Let's talk about some guys who are at least realistic here. Start with some free agents. Mike Evans.
I like Mike Evans. He's a very good player. So I gave him an 8 out of 10 as far as my level of interest. His spot track valuation is only $13 million. You wouldn't have to trade for him and send assets somewhere else.
Yep. He's
been there and done that, really respected. His injury history doesn't bother me. I know you've been fighting with people on Twitter about his injury history because he doesn't have one. He had one injury this year. And so yes, injuries are going to catch up to him. As soon as he comes to Buffalo, he'll probably miss half a season. He turns 33 in August, and that's part of getting old, as I'm very aware of. So all of those things factor in, but the fact that it's only $13 million, it's the type of move the Bills have done at pass rusher. They did it with Joey Bosa. They signed him to a 1-year deal. Right around 13 million, actually, and then spread out the cap hit over a couple different seasons. They could do the exact same thing with Mike Evans and really solidify it for 1 year while they remake the defense. And I think that's kind of the thing that's hanging over everything here is I think they want to use so many of their draft assets on defense that they at least should consider the free agents that they can. He is on an expiring contract, though, and that does affect, at least as far as I know. I haven't looked at the comp pick stuff there. But so it's less likely, I think, Brandon Bean wants that because they have so many defensive free agents that are going to sign other places that they can factor into the compensatory pick formula. But I would sign Mike Evans for sure.
When it comes to the compensatory pick formula. They're also going to, I feel like they're going to sign a lot of guys too, though, man, because they need so much shit on their defense. I'm with you, and I'm so
You're
glad
not wrong. I don't think so.
I'm so glad you said Joey Bosa, because that's what I think of it as. I think of the offensive version of Joey Bosa. Hopefully somebody who doesn't fall off a cliff down the stretch still like Bosa did this past season. Yeah, there's two bitches, fans, and I have been bitching because I mentioned him about a good week and a half ago, and fans have been kind of ripping at me over it. The two complaints is, one, he's injury prone, which is a fabrication. It's not true. But the other one, which in fairness to, critical fans, I'll give them this. If you sign Mike Evans this year, there's a good chance that 12 months from now, you're in the same boat. Like, he's a 1-year Band-Aid, and there's a chance, at least anyway, that 1 year from now, we're in the same boat. What are the Bills going to do at wide receiver? So there's a chance.
They'll have a better understanding of Josh Palmer. They'll have a better understanding of Keon Coleman. They'll have a lot more information a year from now. If Mike Evans is their, quote unquote, big swing at wide receiver.
Agreed. All right. Next one. A guy that I put into my mock-off season on Friday's show, because I still ultimately think, for what it's worth, Mike Evans ends up back in Tampa. They just have this habit of keeping their players. So Rashid Shaheed was my Bills mock offseason acquisition as a free agent. Let's just say it, how do I say this? It didn't go over very well with fans. They did not like it. What do you think, Rashid Shaheed?
He's not my favorite wide receiver. I gave him a 5 out of 10 on this, even though he wouldn't cost any trade compensation, and his valuation on Spot Track is only $14 million. So just a little bit ahead of Mike Evans. If you're comparing those two players, I'd rather have Mike Evans 10 out of 10 times personally.
Me too.
Me too. So he adds returner value. I like him, but he feels like a 2 or 3 receiver for me. And I don't think that the Bills need a 2 or 3 receiver. I think they need the top level talent. And so that's how I'm approaching this. A guy that can step into a 1 or a 1-ish role. And I don't think that's Rashid Shaheed.
That's very fair. My rationale, and I'm not necessarily saying I was right, is I look at Rashid Shaheed and I say, okay, well, if you can give me Brandon Cooks, but Brandon Cooks is going to catch the football when he's got to make the catch, that's Rashid Shaheed. Plus, he returns punts. You don't have your number 1 receiver. You still have the everybody eats. And you get Shakir, you got Palmer, you got Shaheed. Keon, I don't know, as I'm saying it, I'm like, I don't love it as much as I thought I did.
Yeah, I mean, he's topped out at 700 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns in 2023. So it's just like, I don't know. And he had a 46% success rate that year because he goes on so many of those deep routes that don't connect. And so he's not a guy I want as my 1A receiver. That's fine.
And that's fair. And the more I think about it, the more I could be convinced to lean that way as well, because that is a significant investment. If he was a $5-6 million a year player, then it's an easy, I give me him instead of Brandon Cooks. But
it's a little bit higher than the Josh Palmer contract. It's not a huge investment at wide receiver.
And that's another thing too you got to be afraid of. Are we signing the next Josh Palmer? Are we signing the next Curtis Samuel? That's very fair. All right, next name on the list. Interesting one to me. Juwan Jennings, San Francisco.
He was a 4 for me. I had him behind Shaheed. Throwing out this stat just because I think it's relevant here. He has 1 career game over 100 yards. And that was I think it was 175 and 3 touchdowns. And when he kind of introduced himself to the, NFL, when all the 49ers receivers were hurt. And so people look at that game and they're like, oh, I want that guy. But he has 0 other 100-yard receiving games. So he's got a $22.5 million projected average from Spot Track. Holy crap. That's 10 million, or sorry, 8 million more than Rashid Shaheed in the Spot Track valuation. Now I know that valuation isn't the be all end all, but there's a huge projection curve on Jennings that I haven't seen, even though he has probably the best offensive mind, or maybe the second best offensive mind in the NFL calling his plays. And he's had consistent quarterback play over the course of his career. Still can't get, more than 100 yards except for 1 freaking time. Come on, get out of here. And so he's just never been more than a number 2. And I mean, frankly, with what I've seen, I don't know if I can count on him to be anything more than a number 2 or 3.
So I don't have Pickens on our list, and I don't have Pierce on our list because I think there's zero chance that either is going to get to the market. So I want to be clear about that. However, I did just in real time discover that I neglected to put one guy on this list in terms of the free agents that I should have had on there. I want to get your take. So you're going to be doing this literally on the fly.
That's fine.
But Romeo Doubs, I completely forgot about him. Green Bay Packers, I think there is an excellent chance he's going to leave that team. He's going to sign somewhere else. And I want to make sure we mention him because I think he is somebody that at least could be in play for the Bills, assuming that they go the free agent route. So I'll ask you quickly about Romeo Doubs.
Yeah, he's a player that he's another one that I think could get to that, like, I don't know, 1B kind of spot on this list. He's another guy though that hasn't had a huge production. I'm pulling up his stats right now. He hasn't had, just a ton of production despite having very good to great quarterback play. So he got to 724 yards this past season with 6 touchdowns. But I think we've talked about him before in that it feels like when you watch the Packers, he's a guy that can come up with a play for you on a third down. And so to your Brandon Cooks conversation earlier, he feels like a guy that's going to convert on those, 3rd and 8s, he's going to get 9, 3rd and 12, he's going to get 13. So I like him more than I like some of the other guys we've talked about so far. So I would probably put him at a 6 ahead of Rashid Shaheed, but behind Mike Evans.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Part of me, I got to be careful because part of me still says, I feel like his best football is still ahead of him. I said that 12 months ago about Josh Palmer too. Maybe I shouldn't get so scared off because of the Josh Palmer thing, but I also said that 24 months ago about Curtis Samuel too. So, man, I just look at this free agent class and it's like Mike Evans feels like the one kind of sure thing, but only a sure thing for the short term. Whereas these other guys, Shaheed, Jennings, Doubs, kind of like, I don't know. Or is that more of what they already got kind of?
Yeah. And players? He's going to end up with a contract that's like 12 to 15, just like Shaheed, a little bit higher than Josh Palmer. Like, it wouldn't be like horrible to have him come in and compete for a spot. I just don't know if he can take that next step. And that's obviously a big concern when you already have a bunch of guys on your team that you're concerned about that with.
Can we both agree? I didn't have him on the list, but can we both agree that we don't need Deebo Samuel being a Buffalo Bill?
Oh, no, he's not on my list.
Yeah, I don't want him on my list either.
No, I mean, once you start like trashing your entire organization, I mean, I know that Stephon Diggs is, I think, a little bit different, we'll say, in that particular way. But like when you like, especially when you're posting videos of driving, like, whatever it was past the facility, all this other stuff, I don't know. I don't like it.
No, I'm with you as well. I was getting nervous though. Whenever we've talked about this before, whenever Tim Graham connects a name, it makes me think that there was something to it. So I wouldn't rule it out. Anyway, all right, a couple trade candidates. DJ Moore, Chicago Bears.
I like DJ Moore a lot. If he was a free agent, he would probably be the top player we've talked about so far on my list, but because you'll have to send back trade compensation, I have him as a 7, which is right behind Mike Evans on this list. He's only making $13.6 million per year. So when we talk about Shaheed making 14 or Jennings making, 422, like Moore's contract is a lot better. So that's good. Wait, sorry, I did it wrong. My bad. I was looking at his yards per reception last year, which was 13.6, which I think is still good.
Yeah.
And I don't know what was holding him back from getting more targets. He's making $24.5 million next year, which is the high end of the Juwan Jennings thing. So I mixed up the numbers for a second. Sorry. So I like DJ Moore a lot because I think he can be very productive. And he's one of those guys that I do think could fill that number 1 role. And they're paying him like that if they're paying him $24.5 million.
Yeah, listen, first of all, Caleb Williams said Josh Allen. Secondly, the Bears got weapons on that team. Robert Dunze, a top 10 pick. They use a first-round pick on a tight end. If DJ Moore comes to Buffalo, he's the guy.
Yeah.
He's the guy in the receiving game. So I think you can get the most out of him. Now, you can say that about some of these other guys as well, but I like the DJ Moore. Depending on, of course, we don't know what the compensation would be. A.J. Brown, and I will point out, too, Nick Sirianni, Eagles head coach, did say Tuesday morning at the Combine, he says, I can't guarantee that A.J. Brown will be back with the Eagles.
I can.
This season. Yeah, look at his contract. I mean, what are we doing here? I kind of feel it's his, well, in fairness, that's the head coach saying it, so I can't call it fan-driven or media-driven when the head coach is saying that shit himself. I don't see it. Maybe you do, though. A.J. Brown, anyway.
So Brown is not on my list. I gave him a 0, not because I don't want him on my team. I would want him on my team. I just don't see how the Eagles can trade him and sign the guys that they need to on defense. They're already so heavily. They've got $53 million in dead cap hits right now, and this would add $43 million to that. So they'd be near $100 million. So we've talked about teams that can absorb that before. We saw the Broncos do it with Russell Wilson and then go to the AFC Championship game. We've seen other teams do it, the Rams, the Lions, but this is so different because the rest of that roster is so leveraged already. And it wouldn't be just absorbing one Russell Wilson hit. It would be absorbing two of them at the exact same time because of the dead cap they already have. And so that's without re-signing several of their major defensive key pieces. And so I just don't see an A.J. Brown trade happening. I like A.J. Brown as a player. I would love to have him on my team. I just don't see it as a possibility. And, it would probably cost a couple first-round picks. And so I don't love the compensation either.
3 more. Brian Thomas Jr., Jacksonville Jaguars.
Sure. He's an 8 for me. So he's the second 8 on this list alongside of Mike Evans. Young, 1,300 yards in his rookie season. His yards per reception was exactly the same in his first 2 seasons. So it's not like this, it's a talent thing necessarily. It's a target thing. And so, he had a lot of injuries that hampered him last season, but that doesn't necessarily scare me. If his, the same coach that drafted him isn't the one that coached him last year. So he may not have that same loyalty to him. The same with the general manager stuff. So they might be looking to move on from a guy like that if they can get a first round pick for him. And I would be willing to do that, trade that, late first round pick for a guy that I think could be really, really good in Buffalo's offensive system in Brian Thomas Jr.
I get a sense, based on what I heard from last year, too, near the trade deadline, I just get a sense he's realistic for the Bills. I do. Another guy who was linked to the Bills near the trade deadline last year, of course, didn't happen. Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, he's the only 10 on my list because I think he's so talented. He could, for sure be the number 1 guy. He's performed despite the QB carousel in Miami. Only 18 million or so in 2026. So it'd be cheaper than some of the other guys we talked about, like $6.5 million cheaper than DJ Moore in 2026. He has 24 million locked in for 2027 with a rolling guarantee. So it's not a 1-year rental. You have him under contract for multiple seasons. I like the Jalen Waddle a lot if they can get him for a first round pick or less, which I know Brandon Beane didn't want to trade a first round pick for him last year. So I don't know if his opinion has changed now that Sean McDermott's not here.
Well, I could tell you this. They are not going to get him for less than a first-round pick. They're going to give up a first-round pick, and they're going to give up more. And last year, they were willing to give up a first-round pick and more. It was reportedly came down to when was that first-round pick coming. Miami wanted it this year. The Bills wanted to give it to them in 2027. I wouldn't rule it out. Never say never.
Again, new GM, so lacking loyalty, new head coach. So if they're going to do a full rebuild, maybe Waddle isn't in your plans for the next 3 years. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and Tua's not going to be with that. I'm telling you now, they're going to move on from Tua too. So again, I'm not ruling it out, but I don't know, man. It would be surprising. I'd love Jalen Waddle too. He'd be number 1 on my list of all these guys as well. Last guy I had on this list. He's not technically even available right now. So, he could also be a trade candidate, but whether it's a trade or whether he gets waived. So I think the Colts are going to tag Pierce while they work on signing a long-term deal. I think they're going to sign Daniel Jones ultimately to a long-term deal or multiple-year deal at least anyway. I think that might come at the expense of Michael Pittman Jr. I think he's going to be available. Again, does he get waived or does it become a trade? Either way, the player, Michael Pittman Jr., what do you got?
Yeah, I think a trade would be a pretty lofty get for the Colts. He's due $24 million this year, I think. And that's a lot of money. We just talked about, some of these other guys making, that. So, he's 2 years removed from 1,100 yards. He has big touchdown numbers when he had help. He's a guy that could fit that one-ish role. But I don't think that the Bills would trade for him at $24 million. You could do a late round pick swap and then pay him $24 million, I guess. But it just feels like he's going to want to pick where he goes, and the draft compensation isn't going to be worth it for the Colts. So they're just going to cut him.
I'm trying to just make sure that, because one of these guys are going to end up a Buffalo Bill. All right. I feel like I just don't know which one. And I want to make sure we talk about.
I'd like the DJ Moore.
Let me run down some names for you. Okay. And we don't have to talk about every one, but it's because we're going to be out here in a minute, but I'll just run off some names, free agent names. And you tell me if any of these guys kind of tickle your fancy a little bit at all in any way. But Tyreek Hill, let's both say no on that. Okay.
No,
no, quick. No. Lots of reasons, but no. All right. Christian Kirk, Tutu Atwell, Hollywood Brown, Jahad Dotson, Greg.
Christian Kirk is the only one that you've said so far that I'd be like, okay, I could see it.
Slot guy though, man. Yeah, sure. Greg Dortch. Noah Brown is a name. I think I've connected him to the Bills like 4 times. He's played for half the league. He signed with somebody, gets cut, and the Bills never. So I probably not. Zay Jones, Keenan Allen. I'm just looking at all these. Nick Westbrook-Akani. I thought that he's like kind of a Gabe Davis type. That could be a sleeper one. Pat Moran calls it here first on the show. That's about it, dude. That's about it, man.
There's not a lot.
No,
which is why, I think a lot of people have been saying this over the course of just the last, month or whatever. Like, if the Bills are going to get a wide receiver, a trade is probably the most likely option, because what you said, like, there's just not a lot of even mid-tier wide receivers. Like, that's why guys like Josh Palmer get 12 million. That's why a guy like Rashid Shaheed, who might be a glorified number 3 receiver, gets 14 million, or Juwan Jennings with 100-yard game gets 23 million projected. Like, it's just, there's not a lot of guys there. And I do think, not to completely change the topic here, but I do think that's why running back contracts are going to start to become a lot more palatable for teams, because you're looking at paying a guy, Juwan Jennings, $22.5 million, or you can pay a guy like James Cook, like, 14 million or so. Like, it's just, I think it's going to be like, you're going to see a little bit more change in how rosters are constructed when, your number 2 receivers are getting $30 million. Your number 1 receivers are getting $50 million. It's just going to be how things change over the course of the next couple of years.
At the end of the day, do you think the Bills are going to make their biggest wide receiver addition via trade or via a free agent? Now, keep in mind, you got the draft. I got a take on that, though. But what do you think? Do you think that they're going to sign a free agent to add to this room? We know they're going to draft a receiver. Where, we don't, but we know where they're going to draft. They better draft a receiver. But do you think that like the big add to this room comes via draft? Does it come via free agency, or does it come via trade?
Well, I think financially speaking, on the whole roster, I think probably the biggest signing they have in terms of APY, average per year, is going to be a wide receiver, whether it's a signing or a trade. So I think the biggest addition they're going to make is at the wide receiver, financially speaking. I think it's probably going to be a trade, just because, like what we said, I don't love any of the free agent wide receivers outside of Mike Evans. And you even said yourself, you think it's more likely that he ends up with Tampa Bay, and so do I. So I just see a guy like a DJ Moore or a Brian Thomas Jr., pie in the sky Jalen Waddle. I just see that as the move this offseason. And I'm not going to say Brandon Beane's desperate, because I don't think he's desperate, but I think he's getting itchy with how the wide receiver position group looked last year. And with all the holes in the roster, and the defensive side of the roster, it just would make sense that they, use their draft picks and their free agent signings there and trade for a wide receiver.
I agree with you. I think ultimately it's going to be via trade. I don't think there's any wide receivers in this class that are worth signing to like long-term lucrative deals where you can trade for a receiver. Depending on who it is, you give them a new deal too, and you got that locked up for the next 3 to 4 years. And then you head to the draft. I think it's important to not be pigeonholed. Like say if their big signing is Mike Evans, okay? And you and I both like him apparently more than most people do for a couple reasons. But I think you and I would also say that if they sign Mike Evans, they need to get a guy quickly in the draft too. They need to get a high draft pick on a wide receiver. If you go trade for DJ Moore or Brian Thomas Jr., you truly are putting yourself in who's the best player at 26, who's the best player at 60. You're not pigeonholing yourself. If Mike Evans or Rashid Shaheed is your big addition, veteran addition, you're almost saying, I need to take a wide receiver at number 26.
I don't know. We've seen the Bills like get Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir in the mid rounds, and develop them after a year or two. So I don't know if necessarily signing Mike Evans means you need to use your first round pick on a wide receiver. I know not signing Mike Evans will mean you have to use your first round pick on a wide receiver. And going into the draft, I think Brandon Beane loves to have his holes filled unless there's a glut at a position. And so when he was going in to draft Keon Coleman, he knew that there was going to be a bunch of wide receivers in the first and second round that he'd be comfortable with adding to the wide receiver room. He even traded down because they had so many that were still available at pick 30, right? And so I think they could do that at edge this year. I don't think they can do it at wide receiver. So I do think having all of their holes filled except for maybe edge rusher, I think would work that way. I don't think they necessarily would have to draft a wide receiver in the first round if they signed a Mike Evans or any of these guys.
All right, let's put a pin in it for this episode. You got through it, man. What a warrior Matt Warren, SB Nation is. I'll tell you, so by the time we converge next week, I would expect we'd start to see some cuts, not just for the Bills, but bigger cuts around the league. Because when we converge to record our episode next week, we'll be less than a week away from the start of tampering period, which is unofficially the real start of NFL free agency anyway. We might see some trades in the next week around the league or things.
Getting all these general managers into the same room with all the agents during the NFL Combine and the other general managers, you just start to see more movement post-Combine.
Are you getting ready to, maybe not a full, in the deep end of the pool, but starting to dive into some of these draft prospects and getting to learn some of them a little bit more? I'm getting close to that, but I'm not there yet, but I'm getting close.
At SB Nation, we've been going team by team. So we finally got to Ohio State and the University of Miami this week. And I think that's just been going really, really well. I haven't looked at necessarily specific players. I've just kind of been looking at scattershot stuff. I probably won't start looking at specific draft prospects until after free agency, but that's more because I don't like spending time on a player that they signed Joey Bosa and now we don't have to worry about edge anymore or whatever.
That's fair. That's why I hate doing mock drafts early. I never do them on the show until at least 10 days into free agency because let's project an X receiver at number 26 of the Bills in our mock draft that drops today. And then the Bills go and trade for DJ Moore. You know what I mean? It's that's not going to happen anymore. You know what I'm saying? So, or things like that, or let's go, we got the Bills taking a safety and then they trade for Minka Fitzpatrick and they got Cole Bishop before free agency even starts. Right. So that's why I kind of feel like it's a waste. Mock drafts are cool because you learn about players and you gather information and team needs and stuff like that. But when it comes to the players, I just don't. It's too early for me to put any real thought in that. Anyway, all right, make sure you follow Matt on Blue Sky, Twitter X, at Matt Rich Warren, SB Nation, of course. More specifically, to your Buffalo Bills needs, check out Buffalo Rumblings. They ramp it up, especially this time of year. Free agency, the draft, so much great content to consume there. Appreciate you, buddy. Appreciate you getting through this too, man. I really do.
Yeah, have a good week.
All right, guys, I'll be back. Steve Burble is going to join me late Wednesday night live immediately after the Sabres return to action playing the New Jersey Devils. Talk to you guys then.